Hi everyone, my name is Hussein Awad and I would like to welcome you to my Azure Front Door course. In the next few hours we are going to dive deep into Azure Front Door. Before I get into the details of my course, I want to give you a heads up that this course is completely hands-on. There is no PowerPoint slides at all. All the time, you are gonna see me demonstrating stuff on Azure Portal or showing you diagrams on Azure documentation. This is to ensure that you are going to get the best value out of this course. So you are going to apply everything we teach practically, not just theoretically. So we are going to know what is actually Azure Front Door is doing and where it sits in terms of the related load balancers that are available in Azure. Then we are going to go ahead and create an Azure Front Door and we are going to see how you can add a custom domain name for your Azure Front Door and how can you secure it using HTTPS, and how you can use the Apex domain or root domains in the front door, and how you can do redirection, whether it's a protocol redirection from HTTP to HTTPS or URL redirection. Then we are going to talk about the backends and the backend pools, and then talk about caching and how Azure Front Door caches your content in different edge locations around the world. Then we are going to move to the rules engine and understand its architecture and talk about when it's going to get executed when the incoming request hits your front door. Then we are going to talk about the different conditions you can specify and the different actions you can trigger. Then we are going to move into the routing architecture to understand how front door makes routing decisions and tries to match the incoming request with a specific routing rule that you have configured in your Azure Front Door. Also, how Azure Front Door routes incoming requests to the healthy backend instances, and what are the different routing methods that Azure Front Door is using to achieve this. Even though Front Door standard premium tier is still in public preview, we are going to cover it through this video as well. So you are going to see how can you create a standard or premium tier and what is the main feature comparisons between the two tiers. Then we are going to get to the pricing difference between the front door classic, standard, and premium tiers. Then we are going to move to the web application firewall, or some people prefer to call it WAF, and we will understand how it works and when the WAF rules gets executed when Azure Front Door receives a request from the clients. And then we are going to see how can you create a WAF policy and associate it to your Azure Front Door, and what is the difference between WAF Managed Rules and WAF Custom Rules. Then we are going to be moving to the monitoring, where we will be covering how you can create diagnostic settings for your Azure Front Door, what are the key metrics that you need to keep an eye on your production environment, and how can you set up some alerts that are going to notify you when the usage exceeds a specific threshold. And finally, we are going to cover how Azure Front Door is using the health probes to know the health status of the backend instances. I think that's enough to give you an overview what this course is going to cover. Let's get started and let's dive deep into Azure Front Door. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about what is Azure Front Door. So Azure Front Door is a global, scalable entry point for your application that is deployed globally across Microsoft Edge network. And this is one of the key things about Azure Front Door. It is a global service, which you will be able to interpret and orchestrate the traffic globally across multiple regions. Now let's have a look at this diagram here to help us understand how Azure Front Door works and what is the key benefit of using Azure Front Door. Let's assume that we have deployed our workloads on Azure on 3 different regions: Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3. Each of these regions have its own SQL database, VMs, Cosmos DB, and app service. And let's assume that we have a local load balancer. In this case, I would go for application gateway to orchestrate or distribute the traffic evenly within the region. and also will cover some failover scenarios if some backend targets become unhealthy for any reason. All of this are gonna be managed within the region. So we are going to have 3 separate load balancers, regional load balancers, for all of these regions. So we are going to deploy 3 different application gateways here. Now, the question here is how the client is going to get directed to the right region. And when I say the right region, I mean the closer region that has the lowest latency and maybe the healthy region that has the healthy instances. So how are we going to direct this traffic or these client requests to the right region? We will have to have some service in between that will be able to take the client requests, and based on the different routing rules we are going to configure, then it will be able to route the traffic to the right region, or to be more specific, to the right application gateway, which is then going to distribute the traffic to the other backend targets within the region. This is exactly what Azure Front Door is doing. It is a global, scalable, single entry point for your application. So your global customers will have to interact with just one entry point. And then based on the routing rules we are going to configure in the Azure Front Door, it will be able to route the traffic to the right region. Another key feature of Azure Front Door is it operates at layer 7, so it will be able to intercept HTTP and HTTPS traffic, and it will be able to make routing decisions based on the URL values or request headers that has been submitted in the HTTP request. Also, it's worth to know that Azure Front Door is resilient to failures, even failures that affect an entire region. Azure Front Door is resilient for those kind of failures. Because it sets globally, it will direct the traffic to the other healthy regions. This is one of the key benefits of using Azure Front Door. And as we are here talking about the different Azure load balancing services, I am sure that some of you are asking why there are so many load balancing services in Azure. It is so confusing for me. Like we have load balancer, we have front door, we have application gateway, we have traffic manager. And every time I have to use a load balancer, I keep scratching my head what would be the right Azure load balancing service that I should be using in this situation. Although it might seem a little bit confusing when you look at it at the first time, but when you pay a closer look, you will see that there is no confusion at all, and each of these load balancing services has a specific use case and a specific purpose. So if we are going to compare all of the Azure load balancing services across 2 dimensions, the coverage, whether it's a global coverage or regional coverage, and then the recommended traffic, whether it's HTTP or non-HTTP traffic. So let's go for HTTP first. In this case, we are going to have 2 load balancing services, Azure Front Door and the Application Gateway. Both of these are the only 2 that supports HTTP traffic out of the 4 services. So far, it's great. We have narrowed it down from 4 services to 2 services. But again, which one should I go for when I have HTTP traffic that I need to handle? This is when the second dimension comes really handy, which is the coverage. If you have a global coverage, then the Azure Front Door is going to be the right service for you to use. However, if you have a regional coverage, then you should go for Application Gateway. Similarly, for the non-HTTP traffic, we have 2 Azure load balancing services that are recommended for non-HTTP traffic, and they are Traffic Manager and Load Balancer. And similar as before, Traffic Manager supports global coverage, while Azure Load Balancer supports regional coverage only. So having these 2 dimensions next to the Azure load balancing services, when you make your decision about which Azure load balancing service you should choose, it's going to help you to pick up or choose the right Azure load balancing service that fits your requirement and use case. Table is very useful and is going to help you to choose the right load balancing service. Now, I have done a course for the application gateway before, and currently I'm doing the front door, which you are already watching, and I'm planning in the near future to cover the other two services, Traffic Manager and Azure Load Balancer. That's all I have for you in this video. It was a quick introduction about what is Azure Front Door. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. Before we get started, I want to give you a quick heads up. As you already know, this course is completely hands-on. So we are going to spend a lot of time working on Azure Portal and create a lot of resources. And I really encourage you to follow along with me and create the resources that I'm creating on your own. So after this course, you will have enough understanding of Azure Front Door. Having said that, bear in mind that if you are going to follow along with me, you will be expected to pay some money to Azure at the end of the month, because we are going to create some resources on Azure Portal, as I said before. However, in my case, when I prepared this video, it costs me around 50 Australian dollars, 50. You could just check what would be the equivalent for other Azure regions. If you are not happy paying some money to Azure by the end of this course, so please don't create any resources on your Azure portal and just watch what I'm doing, and it will give you enough information about Azure Front Door. Let's get started and let's learn Front Door together. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to dive deep into the core features of Azure Front Door. Firstly, we're gonna see how can we create Azure Front Door, and then how you can set up a custom domain name for the Azure Front Door, and how can you secure it, and what are the different redirections you can use in Azure Front Door, whether traffic redirection from HTTP to HTTPS or URL redirection. Then we are going to talk about the backends and the backend pools. Also, we are going to cover the caching and how you can purge the cache at all edge locations that Azure Front Door might be cached your content. Let's dive straight into it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to create an Azure Front Door. And as you can see here, this is a brand new Azure subscription, doesn't have any resources at all. So let's get started by creating a resource group. I'm gonna call it Australia East Resource Group. I'm gonna put it in Australia East region, and let's go ahead and create our resource group. Now, let's create some app services to be the backend for my front door. I'm gonna create a new app service. I'm gonna put it in Australia East Resource Group. I'm gonna call it Front Door Web App 1. And then I'm gonna make the platform or runtime stack .NET Core 3.1 and in Australia East region. And I don't have any app service plan. So let's go ahead with the one that Azure Portal suggested me to create. Then going to the next step, deployment. Continuous deployment is going to be disabled as default. Let's go to monitoring. I'm going to disable the application insights, and let's go ahead and create the app service. And while it's been created, let's go ahead and create another app service, because I'm planning to have two app services as a backend targets for my Azure Front Door. So let's create another app service. Let's put it in Australia East Resource Group. I'm gonna call it Front Door Web App 2. And then the runtime stack will be .NET Core 3.1. I'm gonna put it in Australia East, everything as before. And this time I'm going to use the app service plan I've created in the first app service that I just created. Now let's go to deployment. I am going to disable continuous deployment as it's already disabled. Then going to monitoring, I'm going to disable application insights. And let's go ahead and create the second web app or second app service. And while it's been created, let's go back and create an Azure front door. So let's browse to front doors. And let's go ahead and create a new front door. Let's put it in Australia East Resource Group. And then going to the configuration, where we are going to configure the front-end domains and the back-end targets, and then the routing rules. And the host name is going to be my front door. The name is already used. I'm gonna put my name. Okay, my front door Hussein. This is my front-end domain for my Azure front door. And let's keep everything to the default values. Let's go ahead and add the front end. Now, moving to the backend pools, let's go ahead and add backend pool. And then we are gonna have two targets. My first target is going to be an app service. And I'm going to choose front door web app 1 and leave everything to the default values. And then I'm going to add another backend target. I'm going to choose app service again, but this time I'm going to choose web app 22. And then let's go ahead and add the backend target. Let's leave everything to the default values, and let's add the backend pool for my Azure front door. Then the last step I have here is to create or configure a routing rule. So I'm gonna call it routing rule. Again, it's gonna accept HTTP and HTTPS traffic. And the front end domain is going to be the front end that we've just configured in the Azure front door. And then it's gonna forward the traffic to the backend pool that has two app service as a backend targets. And let's leave everything to the default values and add our routing rule. Now let's go ahead and create our Azure front door. Now my Azure front door has been deployed for me, so let's go and test it. So this is my Azure front door. I'm gonna copy the front-end host. And as you can see here, my front-end domain I have configured for my front door directed the traffic to the backend app services I have created before. Now, let's go ahead and stop these two app services just to show you that my front door is actually directing the traffic to those two app services. So what's gonna happen when I stop these two app services, that nothing is gonna get displayed when I refresh this page. But this is not the case because of the browser cache. So I'm going to copy the domain name. I'm gonna put it in incognito address bar. And as you can see here, the web app is stopped. This is all I have for you in this video. We have just created an Azure front door and linked it to our two backend targets and how we directed the traffic from the front-end domain name to the backend targets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how can you add a custom domain name for your front door. As you can see, our front-end endpoint is not really nice. It has an Azure FD.NET at the end. It's not good to be used in a production workload and for your branding purposes. So now we are going to see how you can use a custom domain name and use it in your Azure front door. First thing, you need to go to your domain provider where you have registered your custom domain name. And because I don't have any registration with any domain provider, I'm going to show you the steps in Azure DNS zones, and you should be able to apply the same steps in your domain providers. So I'm gonna go ahead and search for DNS zones, and I'm going to create a new zone. I'm gonna put it in Australia East Resource Group. I'm gonna call the zone HusseinAwad.com. And let's go ahead and create this zone. And let's go to our DNS zone. Now I'm going to create a record set. And for the name, I'm going to specify it front door, for example. And in here, I'm going to choose a C name. And I'm going to link it to the DNS record for my front door. So I'm gonna browse to the front door and copy the front end domain name for my front door. And let's put it in the alias of my CNAME record. Let's take out the HTTPS and let's add this record. Our record set has now created, so let's go back to our front door and see how can we apply these changes. So I'm gonna go to the front door designer and then I'm gonna go ahead and add a custom host name. And in this case, I'm gonna add the front door .HusseinAwad.com, and definitely it's not going to work because this is not an actual domain name. But if you are using an actual domain name that you have already registered with a domain provider, it should work, and you will be able to make your users use the custom host name that you entered in here to access your website through front door. Now, there is an interesting point you need to be aware of if your custom domain has already some production workloads, because you might experience a little bit of a downtime until this domain changes took place. And to avoid this, you need to map your custom domain to the default front-end host for the front door, which is going to be AFD verify subdomain. And it's going to be exactly same steps I've just showed you before. However, you are going to do it temporarily to ensure that your users will be able to access your domain until the DNS mapping took place. This is only required if your custom domain has a production workload. However, if you are going to have a brand new custom domain name that doesn't have any production workloads, then you shouldn't worry about this temporary step at all. Now let's go back and clean things up. And I'm going to go to my DNS zone and delete my DNS zone. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about how can we secure our custom domain name using HTTPS. Generally speaking, the default endpoint for Azure front door is secured by HTTPS, as we can see in front of us here. But this is not the case when we define a custom domain name for our front door. You have to define or you have to configure the HTTPS for the custom domain names you add to your front door. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a custom domain name here. I'm gonna put my name. And according to the last video, it's not going to work because you will need to add a CNAME record to your domain provider. Anyway, if we scroll down a little bit, you will see that we have an option here to define a custom domain HTTPS. So let's go ahead and enable it. Then you are going to choose what is the minimum TLS version that you want to select for your custom domain name. And I'm gonna go with the latest version, 1.2. Then when it comes to the certificate management, you have two options. Whether you make Azure front door to manage the certificates for you, or you can create your own certificate in Key Vault. And there are many benefits to make Azure manage the certificates for you. First of all, it's free, like you are not going to pay any cost for certificate acquisition or renewal. Also, it's very simple and easy, just one click and you are going to enable a certificate for a custom domain. Finally, and more importantly, you wouldn't need to worry about certificate management at all, because Azure front door is doing it for you. So you wouldn't need to worry about any risk of service interruption in case of your certificate has been expired. However, in some cases, you cannot use Azure Front Door to manage certificates on your behalf. For example, when you have an Apex or root domains, you can't use Azure Front Door managed certificates. In this case, you will have to use an Azure Key Vault and use your own certificate for the Apex and root domains. And if you don't know what root domain or Apex domain means, we are going to talk about it in more details in the next video. So for the first option, to make Azure manage your certificates on your behalf, this is all the configurations you have to do. However, if you want to use a key vault and use your own certificate for Apex or root domains, you will have to do some more steps. As you can see in here, the Azure portal suggests us to run some commands to create a service principal and give it an access to the key vault where my certificate is stored. However, I would rather to show it from the Azure portal how this works and what are the exact steps that we will need to do. So I'm gonna go ahead to Azure Active Directory. And I'm going to browse to app registrations. And I'm going to create a new app registration. I'm gonna call it Front Door App. And let's go ahead and register it. Then I will need to go to my subscription to create a service principal to the Front Door app I just created. So going to my subscription, browse to access controls, and add a role assignment. And in here, I'm gonna specify a contributor role to the Front Door app I've just created. And then in here, I'm going to select a member, which is going to be Front Door app. And then I'm gonna select it. And let's go ahead and assign this role to my subscription. Then I'm going to browse to Key Vault to go ahead and create a Key Vault and create a self-assigned certificate and show you how I can assign it from the Front Door configuration. Now, let's go ahead and create a Key Vault. I'm gonna put it in Australia East Resource Group. I'm gonna call it Key Vault Front Door Certificates. And I'm going to put it in Australia East region. Standard tier. Gonna change the days to retain deleted vaults to 7 days, which is the minimum number of days you can go for. Like if I try to make it 2, it won't work. Now, let's go to the next steps and define the access policy. So since I'm the creator of this key vault, I have already an access to the key vault, but I still need to create an access to the Front Door app I just created. So firstly, let me select Get for the secret permissions and also for the certificate permissions. And when it comes to the principal here, I'm going to choose my Front Door app I just created. Let's select this one and let's add this access policy. Then moving to the networking, I'm not going to choose or specify any networking restrictions. However, you shouldn't do this in a production environment. You should restrict the access to the secrets in your key vaults at all times. Now, I'm going to go ahead and create my key vault. Alright, my key vault now is created, so I'm gonna browse to my key vault. And let's go to certificates. And I'm going to create or generate a new certificate, self-assigned certificate. I'm gonna make the CN name to be my name, for example. And then let's leave everything to the default values. I'm gonna go ahead and create this certificate. Now, I'm gonna go back to my Front Door and I'm gonna show you how I'm going to assign the certificate I just created in the Key Vault to my custom domain name. So again, I'm gonna put the custom host in here, the HTTPS and now I am going to choose using my own certificate. And in here, I can choose my key vault and the secret, which is certificate, and then the certificate version. Usually it's recommended to go for the latest one. And these are all the changes you will have to do to choose your own certificates to secure or provide an HTTPS security for a custom domain name that you create in your Azure front door. That's all I have for you in this video. Now I am going to clean things up. So I'm gonna delete the key vault, and then I'm gonna remove the role assignment for the front door app. And then I'm going to go back to the Active Directory and delete front door app I've created. So this was all I have for you in this video. We have seen how can we secure our custom domain names using HTTPS, either using Azure Front Door Managed Certificates or using your own certificates that are stored in Key Vault. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how can we create an Apex domain name for our Azure front door. But firstly, let's understand what Apex domain name means. So if I'm going to open a new browser tab and type in HusseinAwad.com, this is an example of Apex domain name or a root domain name. However, if I'm going to put any prefix like frontdoor.HusseinAwad.com or dev.HusseinAwad.com, then in this case it won't be an Apex domain name. So what's the difference for us? If you remember, in a previous video, when you have created a custom domain name for our Azure front door, we created a CNAME record for our domain provider and linked it to the front end of our Azure front door. However, there is a limitation of linking or creating a CNAME record for the Apex domain name. So if you want to have your custom domain name to be your Apex domain name for the Azure front door, it won't work by using the CNAME record for your domain provider. So I'm gonna go ahead now and show you how can we do it in the DNS zone. So firstly, I'm gonna create a DNS zone. And I'm gonna put it in Australia East Resource Group, and I'm gonna call it HusseinAwad.com, and let's go ahead and create the DNS zone. Let's go to our DNS zone, and let's create a CNAME record, which what we have done before when we tried to create a custom domain name. We called it frontdoor.HusseinAwad.com, and we linked it. We created a CNAME record and we linked it to the front end of our Azure front door. Let's take the HTTPS out. However, I want you to notice something in the CNAME record. This is going to be what the client needs to use in order to be able to access your custom domain name. As you can see here, it's not the Apex domain name. And sometimes you want to allow your customers to be able to access your custom domain name by just hitting the Apex domain name. And in this case, by just typing in HusseinAwad.com. However, as I said before, there is a limitation for creating a CNAME record for the Apex domain name. So let's go ahead and see what does this mean. So if I try to create a CNAME record for the Apex domain name, it won't work. It will ask me to provide some prefix for the custom domain name. As you can see here, it's not allowed by DNS protocol to create a CNAME record for the Apex domain name. But what we can do in this case is to create an alias record. And in this case, it will allow me to create a custom domain name for the Apex domain name. And in this case, I'm gonna create a record set and I'm gonna route it to my Azure front door, and then let's go ahead with that. Now my A alias record has been created, and then when the client wants to access my custom domain name, they would be able to access it straight by typing in the Apex domain name of my domain. So let's go back to my Azure front door and see how can we add this Apex domain name as a custom domain name for my Azure front door. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the Apex domain name in the custom host name in here. So I'm gonna put my name in here. And if you want to have HTTPS protocol for your custom domain name, then you go ahead and enable it. And if you remember from a previous video that you cannot use a front door managed certificates for the Apex domain names. And in this case, you will have to use your own certificate that's stored in a key vault. And I'm going to refer you to the previous video to see how can we use a key vault to create a certificate and then to be used for the Azure front door in case you are using the Apex domain name as a custom domain name for your Azure front door. So this is the key difference between the CNAME record and the A alias record. CNAME record cannot be used for the Apex domain name. And if this is what you want, you need to create an A alias record. And always remember, if you are going to go ahead and create a custom domain name for an Apex domain name, then you will have to use your own certificate that's stored in Key Vault, because front door managed certificates cannot be applied for an Apex domain names. That's all I have for you in this video. So I'm gonna go ahead now and clean things up. So I'm going to delete the DNS zone I've just created. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how can we do redirection from HTTP traffic to HTTPS through our Azure front door. To understand what this means, let's copy the front end of our Azure front door and put it in incognito window. You can notice here, it's HTTPS traffic. And when we hit it, we get a secured traffic through our backend pool. But let's try to change the HTTPS to HTTP only and see what we will get. In result, we had been redirected to our backend pool, but in this case, our traffic is not secure because it's over HTTP protocol. And what we are going to see in this video is how to redirect the HTTP traffic to HTTPS. Now let's get started. Let's go to our front door designer and then let's edit our routing rules. So I'm gonna change the name of our routing rule and make it HTTP redirection. And then for the accepted protocol, I'm going to choose HTTP only. And the front end is already selected, the front end of our Azure front door. Now I'm going to choose the route type to be redirect. And I'm going to make it for HTTPS. So for every incoming HTTP traffic through the Azure front door, it's going to be redirected to HTTPS. And I'm gonna go ahead and update this rule. Actually, I need to go ahead and create another routing rule. I'm gonna call it Backend Routing. And this rule, it's going to accept only HTTPS traffic. The front end is the same front end of our Azure front door. And then I'm gonna forward it to our backend pool through HTTPS only. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add this routing rule. Then let's save our changes. Alright, now my changes has been saved. Let's get back to incognito to test our changes. And as you can notice here, when we tried to hit the front end of our Azure front door, we have got not secure traffic because we tried to access our front door using HTTP protocol. And now, after we have created this routing rule, we are going to be able to redirect the HTTP traffic to HTTPS. So we are going to end up having a secure connection to our backend pool. So let's go ahead and refresh this page. And as you can see here, it's now secure traffic. And if we had a closer look at the protocol, it's HTTPS. Even though if we try to change it to HTTP, again, it always ends up with HTTPS. This is according to the redirection we have configured in our routing rule to redirect HTTP traffic to HTTPS. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how can we do URL redirection in our Azure front door. We have already seen how can we do a traffic redirection, like how can we redirect HTTP traffic to HTTPS in the last video. Now in this video, let's go ahead and go to our front door designer. And then let's click on the backend routing. And what I'm going to change here is the route type. Instead of forwarding the traffic to our backend pool, I'm going to redirect it permanently to another host. And in this case, I'm going to use Google. And I can change the destination path as well. So I'm going to make a search query to a specific query string parameter like forward test. And then let's go ahead and update our routing rule. And let's go ahead and save our changes. Alright, now my changes has been saved. So let's go ahead and open incognito window. And let's copy the front end of my Azure front door. As we have configured our routing rule, the traffic has been redirected to Google and performed a search forward test. This is just to show you how can we do or configure URL redirection in the routing rules in your Azure front door. So let's go back and revert our changes. So I'm going to go for the backend routing and bring it back to forward the traffic to our backend pool. And let's go ahead and update our routing rule and then save our changes. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the backend targets and the backend pool in the Azure front door. So let's go to the front door designer, and we are able to see here the list of the backend pools we have configured in our Azure front door. So let's dive deeper into this. So this is our backend pool, and as you can see here, we have created two backend targets for our backend pool. And these two targets could be hosted in Azure or on-prem or any other cloud provider. As long as it's reachable through the public internet and it has a public IP address, then you could configure it as an endpoint or a target for your backend pool. So let's go ahead and add a new backend. And as you can see here, these are the different host types that you can add as a backend target for your backend pool. And we have already added two app services as a backend target for our pool. And you are able to add all of these services. And if you want to add something else that hasn't specified in this list, you can go for the custom host. And then you specify the public IP address or fully qualified domain name, and then you will be ready to go. So let me change it back to the app service. But before we get into that, I want you to notice here the application gateway could be a target for Azure front door, which is quite interesting. Like both of the front door and application gateway are considered to be one of the Azure load balancing services. So we are going to direct the traffic from one load balancer to another load balancer, which is interesting. But the main difference here, as I said at the beginning of this video or of this course, that the Azure front door considered to be a global service. So you are going to have the front door to accept the traffic globally coming from your customers. And then after you are going to direct the traffic to a different regions, you can place a regional load balancer, which is in this case could be application gateway, to route the traffic to different instances within the same region. Anyway, so let's get back to the backend targets. So if we select an app service, for example, you will get to choose a subscription where the backend instance is gonna be hosted. And this is one of the interesting things about Azure Front Door, because it's a global service, so it's not tied to a specific subscription. You can specify any instance in the same subscription or in a different subscription, maybe in the same region or in a different region. And then you get to specify the backend host name, which is in this case the host name of my app service, and then the host header is gonna be filled automatically. And then you get to specify the HTTP port, HTTPS, and then we will have the priority and weights, which are two interesting configurations. And let's dive a little bit more into these. So for the priority one, there is something called priority traffic routing, which allows you to configure what would be the primary instance and what would be the first backup, second backup, and so on. So it's a way to allow you to configure active-active configuration or active-passive configuration, which are very common terms in disaster recovery scenarios. So what does it mean? So let's get back to the backend pools. As you can see here, both of my backend targets has priority 1, which means both of them are going to accept the traffic at the same time, which makes both of them an active-active configuration for my Azure front door. However, if I'm gonna go ahead for the second app service and change its priority to be 2, what does this mean? That all my traffic now is going to be directed to app service 1, which has priority 1. And app service 2 will never get any traffic as long as app service 1 is up and running. This is what we mean by active-passive configuration. And this is very common in disaster recovery scenarios. You can configure the priority to be any number from, let's first bring the priority back to be 1 for app service 2. The priority here can be any number between 1 to 5. Like if I try to put 6 in here, it won't work. And the lower the priority, the lower the number, the higher the priority. Which means like 1 in here will be the highest priority in this configuration. Now let's come to the weights, which is another interesting configuration you can do for the Azure front door. And it's called weighted traffic routing, where you can assign the weight for each backend in the front door configuration. And it can be any number between 1 to 1000, and the default is 50. As you can see here, could be any number between 1 to 1000. We are gonna come back to the weighted traffic routing in more details, probably in the routing section. And it's important to mention that the host header should be exactly the same as the host name if you are using any of the app service or blob storage or cloud service. Now, let's get back to the backend pool and see what other configurations we can do for the backend pool itself. But firstly, let's talk about what the backend pool means. It's a logical grouping of your application instances. Could be in the same region or in a different region. But all of these instances has to do the same job. And you could have them in an active-active deployment, or you could have them in an active-passive configuration, as I've talked about in the priority traffic routing before. And in order for Azure Front Door to know the health status of the backend targets, Azure Front Door is going to use health probes to know the health status of those backend targets. So you can specify the path of your health probes and which protocol is going to operate on, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. And when it comes to the probe method, you could choose either of head or get verbs. However, for lower load and cost, you should go for the head. Yeah, it's already mentioned in here. And also you get to specify the interval. How often Azure Front Door is going to check for the health status of the backend targets. And the default here is 30 seconds. Then finally here we are coming to the load balancing, which is a way to help Azure Front Door to decide how it's going to evaluate the health status of the backend targets. So let's say that we set our sample size to be 4, and our interval here is 30 seconds. And we have configured that the successful sample required are going to be 2. So over the last 2 minutes, which is the time required to send 4 samples, we configured the Azure Front Door to receive at least 2 successful samples from the backend target in order to mark that backend target as a healthy backend target. Finally, here we have the latency sensitivity. This is what you are going to define if you want to make your Azure Front Door send the requests to backends within a specific latency range, or you just forward the request to the closest backend to the Azure Front Door. And again, we are gonna come again to the latency traffic routing in more details in the routing section. That's all I have for you in this video. We have talked about the backend pools and the backend targets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see how can we play around with the rules engine and add a security headers to our front door. So let's get started by going to the Azure Front Door and go to Rules Engine Configuration. And let's go ahead and add a new rule. I'm going to call it My Rules Engine. And the rule name here, it's gonna be My Rule. And in this case, I'm not going to specify any condition because I want to apply this security header to all requests coming through my Azure Front Door. So let's go straight for the action and add a response header. And let's append content security policy. And for the header value here, let's put script src self, and then putting the https api.azure.net or any other URL you would like. It's not actually going to work. Now, after we have added the rules engine, we need to get back to the front door designer and attach the rule engine we have created to the routing rules. So as you can see here in our routing rule, there is no rules engine is configured. Now let's go ahead and select my rules engine I've just created. And let's go ahead and save my changes. Now my front door has been updated, so let's go and test it. So I'm gonna browse to my front door DNS. As you can see, the web app is stopped. So I need to start my app services. So let's select all of them and start my app services. They are now ready. Now, as you can see, our front door has directed the traffic again to our app services. Now, how can we tell that the rules engine that we have created actually took place? So let's press on F12 to see the console. And as you can see here, the content security policy directive that we have specified violates some requirements because actually the endpoint I have entered is not actually working. I just put it to show you how can we add a new security header to the HTTP responses that are coming out of the front door, and how we can put a specific values on those headers. This is just to show you how can we play around with the rules engine and create some actions or add a security headers to the HTTP responses coming out of the front door. Now let's go ahead and clean things up because we are going to get back to the rules engine in more details later. This is just to give you an overview about what rules engine is about. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this rule engine, but it's already associated to the routing rule. So what I need to do is to deassociate my rule engine from the routing rule, and then I will be able to delete my rules engine from front door configuration. Now let's get back to the rules engine configuration and delete the rule engine I have created. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to go ahead and create a web application firewall policy and associate it with our front door. So let's get started and see how can we do this. Let's search for web application firewall policies. And let's go ahead and create a new policy. So when I create the WAF policy, I have to choose what service this policy is for. And in this case, it's going to be for my front door. And I'm going to put it in Australia East Resource Group. And I'm going to call it WAF Front Door Policy. And leave it as a detection mode as a default. Now moving to the managed rules. I'm going to choose rule set 1.1, and as you can see here, I can enable or disable specific rules according to my requirements. And as you can see here, all of these rules are already enabled by default. If you have some specific requirements to exclude some rule, you can just go ahead and disable this rule. However, I'm not gonna go ahead and do that. Also, you can add additional rule set, like bot protection rule set. And similar as before, you are able to see the enabled rules, and you can go ahead and disable any rule that doesn't work for your requirements. Now let's go to the policy settings. And I'm going to leave everything to the default values. And for the custom rules, I'm going to create a new custom rule. So I'm gonna call it my custom rule. And I'm gonna give it a priority 1. And I'm gonna make it for geolocation. If it's not Australia, then I'm going to deny traffic. So I'm creating a geolocation filtering here to block any traffic that's not coming from Australia. Let's go ahead and add this custom rule. And in here, I can go ahead and add the front door for this policy, as you can see here. However, I'm not gonna do it from here. I will do it from the front door after this policy is created. So let's go ahead and create this WAF policy. Alright, the WAF policy is now deployed. Let's get back to the front door and see how can we associate the WAF policy with our front door. And as you can see here, we have a menu item for web application firewall. And if I'm going to select the front end domain for my Azure front door, and then I will be able to apply a policy for this domain. And now I'm going to specify the WAF policy I've just created, and I'm gonna go ahead and add it to my Azure front door, and then let's save my changes. Alright, now the WAF policy has been associated with my front-end domain I have configured for my front door. This is just to show you how can we attach WAF policy with our front door. And we are going to come back to the web application firewall part in the front door in more details later. I was just showing you how can you configure or associate a WAF policy with an Azure front door. Now let's go ahead and clean things up. So I'm going to select the front-end domain of my Azure front door. And I'm going to remove this policy and save my changes. And now let's go back to the WAF policies and remove our policy. Let's select our WAF policy and go ahead and delete it. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the caching behavior in Azure Front Door. You remember when I mentioned that Azure Front Door is a global service and also considered to be a CDN because it has an ability to cache certain content at different edge locations around the world. So let's go ahead and see from where can we configure the cache in Azure Front Door. So it is in the routing rules where you can enable and configure the caching behavior for your Azure Front Door. And as you can see here, once you enable cache, you will be able to select the cache behavior, whether to ignore a query strings or cache every unique URL or ignore specific query strings or include specific query strings. These are the different caching behaviors that you are asking Front Door to implement when they cache your content at different edge locations. And then we are coming to the dynamic compression. You can enable it or disable it as you like. Then coming to the cache duration or default cache duration. So in any caching system, there is a term called cache expiry. This is a duration of time that the Azure Front Door is going to keep your cached content at the edge location, and it's not going to bring it from the backend target. This is to speed up the response that's been sent to the end user. So if you are going to enable the default cache duration for Azure Front Door, then Azure Front Door is going to keep your content at the different edge locations until the default cache duration expires. However, if you wish to specify your own cache expiration policy, you can go ahead and specify the minimum cache duration you want Azure Front Door to use when they cache your content. So why cache expiration exists? It actually exists to ensure that the end user is going to get up-to-date or latest content from your backends. And you need to maintain a good balance here for your cache duration, because if it's too little, probably it might be useless, because every few seconds Azure Front Door might need to get the fresh content from the backend targets. At that point, your caching wouldn't achieve much benefit. However, if you have made the cache duration too big, then the end client might get old content that you have already updated sometime. Now, let's assume that you have configured your caching behavior in a certain way, and for some reason, you want to clear all the cache in all edge locations around the world. Maybe you have made a big update and you want to make sure that the end users are gonna start fresh, receiving your latest or recent content. There is a way to do this by purging your cache. So you can go ahead here and purge all content in all edge locations around the world. Or if you are more specific, you can specify what exactly you want to cache. Maybe you can go for the root domain, or maybe you go for a specific file like pictures and then welcome.png, for example. Or you can go for a wildcard domain, maybe going for docs and then all of the documents under docs. These are the different ways you can instruct Azure Front Door to purge certain cached content at different edge locations. And of course, you can purge all if you want Azure Front Door to get rid of all cached content in all edge locations around the world. Caching is going to improve the performance of your solutions a lot, and you should be considered using cache whenever it is applicable for your architecture. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this section, we are going to dive deep into the rules engine configuration. Firstly, we will understand what is the rules engine architecture and when exactly it takes place in terms of the incoming request that's hitting our Azure Front Door. Then we are going to talk about the different conditions you can specify for the rules engine and the different actions you can trigger. Let's get straight into it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the rules engine in the Azure Front Door. And we have already created a rules engine and associated it with a routing rule in a previous video if you remember. And now we are going to dive deeper into the rules engine configurations. So simply speaking, the rules engine allows you to change or customize the HTTP requests that are coming or handled by Azure front door. So you can apply certain behaviors on the incoming requests based on a specific conditions. And there are some scenarios you want to consider using the rules engine for your Azure front door. Maybe when you want to enforce HTTPS connection with the end customer to ensure that they always have a secure connection with your application. Or maybe when you want to implement some security headers to prevent common browser vulnerabilities, like HTTP strict transport security, or cross-site scripting, or content security policy, or X-frame options, or access control allow origin headers for cross-origin resource sharing. This kind of security-based attributes that can be defined in the rules engine configurations. Or maybe when you want to route a request to a mobile or desktop versions of your application, based on some information in the content or cookies or query string or HTTP headers. Or if you want to make some redirection, maybe internally or externally, based on the incoming protocol or incoming request path. And we have seen the URL redirection in a previous video, and you should be able to achieve the same using the rules engine as well. Also, if you want to modify the caching configurations based on the incoming request, and if you want to change or rewrite the request URL and forward it to a specific backend target based on the incoming request parameters. So those are the different things you can do in the rules engine configurations. Now let's look at some diagrams and try to understand how the rules engine work and when actually it's going to be executed. So firstly, when the client sends the request to Azure front door, the first thing it's going to get evaluated is the WAF policies to ensure that the request is fine, secure, doesn't have any security vulnerabilities to our applications. And once the WAF policies are executed and nothing wrong with the incoming request, then the rules engine is going to take place. Usually the rules engine has a condition and an action. When the condition is met, when the condition is true, the action is going to take place. When the condition is false, the action is not going to be applied. And in this scenario here, we have configured our action to extend the lifetime of the cache to be the maximum age. This only going to be executed when the condition is true, which is the request file extension is GPG. However, when the condition is false, then the request is going to be routed to the routing rule, and then the backend is going to respond with the default cache control we have configured in our backend target. So when the incoming request matches the condition we have specified in our rules engine, then in this case, the cache control is going to be changed in our response header to the customer. And if the condition doesn't met in the incoming request, then the request is going to be routed to the routing rule, and then we are going to respond with the default cache control to the customer. Now, let's look at another example to help us understand it better. Let's say that we have created the rules engine with a condition to check for the device type the client is using to connect to our application. And based on our rules engine condition here, if the device is mobile, then we are going to direct the customer to a mobile version of our app. However, when the condition is false and the customer is connecting from a desktop, then we are going to direct it to the routing rule, which we are going to respond with the desktop version of our application. So according to our rules engine configuration, if we have a client trying to connect to our application from their mobile device, then we are going to respond with the mobile version of our application. And if we have another customer connecting to our application using their desktop, then we are going to respond with the desktop version of our application. This is just to give you a quick overview of what is the rules engine and where it sits in terms of the WAF evaluation and rules engine configuration and when exactly it gets executed. And in the next few videos, we are going to dive deep into the rules engine and its conditions and actions. So you will be able to tell what are the different conditions you could set in the rules engine and what are the different actions you could apply as well. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to see the different conditions we can specify in our rules engine. So let's get started by creating a rules engine. I'm gonna call it my rules engine. Then my rule name here is going to be rule 1. Now let's go ahead and add different conditions. Let's start with the device type. And this allows us to identify requests that are coming from a specific device, whether it's a mobile or desktop. Also, we can add a condition based on the post argument, and this will help us to identify requests based on arguments sent in the post request body. Let's say that we want to identify the customer name in the post arguments if it begins with some values like X. And also I can do some transformation for these arguments. However, I'm not gonna do any at the moment. Also, we can create a condition on query string, and this will help us to identify requests based on a specific query string. Maybe, for example, it's gonna contain language equal English US. Also, I can specify a condition based on the remote address, and I can specify a geomatch, selecting few countries or all countries that I would like to identify in my request. Or I can specify IP address range. Could be single IP address or could be a CIDR range. Also, I can add a condition based on the request body to identify requests based on a certain information or certain text that's been sent in the request body. So let's make a condition if it contains some words like error, for example. Also, I can make a condition based on the request file name to identify requests that include a specified file name in the URL. If it's equals secure.xml, for example. Also, I can make a condition based on the file extension, so I can identify requests that include the specified file extensions in the request URL. So if it's equal, maybe PDF or XML or doc, I can include multi-values in the values here. Also, I can add a condition that are going to identify requests based on a specific request header. And let's put my header name to be my header, and then it's gonna equal certain value like 10. Also, I can add a condition based on the request method. So I will be able to identify the incoming requests based on a specific HTTP verbs. Maybe I have incoming request for a delete verb or a trace verb. I am able to identify these verbs for my incoming requests. Also, I can add a condition based on the request path to identify some requests based on the path or the incoming request path. Maybe if it contains some API.domain in the request path. As you can see here, after I have created 10 conditions, I'm not able to create or add any more conditions, because this is the maximum number of conditions I can create for my rules engine. So what I'm gonna do now is just delete the last one so I can add extra conditions. I can add another condition based on the request protocol, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS, so I can identify the incoming traffic or incoming requests, whether they are HTTP or HTTPS. Also, I can add another condition for the request URL. So if the request URL contains a specific text, I will be able to identify them in this condition. For example, if it contains some values like API, for example, I will be able to detect it and it's gonna trigger my condition. Now we have seen the different conditions we could configure in our rule. Now let's see what are different actions we can trigger. We can create an action for the request header, and we can append, overwrite, or delete. Maybe I'm gonna append it and add content security policy as a header. Then the header value, for example, is gonna be 100. Also, I can add an action for the response header. That is going to be returned to my clients. I can add some action or maybe delete some of the headers, sensitive headers that I don't want to be sent back to my clients. Maybe in this case could be the ASP.NET version. Also, I can add an action to override the routing configuration I have specified in the routing rule. So I can either forward or redirect the traffic. So if I'm gonna forward it, I can forward it to a different backend pool, or choosing the forwarding protocol, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. Whether I'm gonna do any URL rewriting or any caching would be enabled for this rule. And if I enable the caching in here, you will see that I can play around with the caching configuration. Or I can route the traffic or redirect the traffic to another destination based on the configurations in here. And you have already seen the URL redirection in the routing rules configuration, and you should be able to get or achieve the same results using the redirection or forwarding configuration in the rules engine configuration. This is all I have for you in this video. This is to show you how can we create different rules engines and specify some conditions and also trigger some actions based on those conditions. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to dive deep into the routing architecture and understand how the routing works in Azure Front Door. And we are going to dive deep into the different routing rules and how Azure Front Door is matching the incoming request to a specific matching rule. And then we are going to talk about the different routing methods that Azure Front Door is using to route the traffic to a particular backend instance. So we are going to talk about the latency-based routing, weighted-based routing, priority-based routing, and session affinity-based routing. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the routing architecture of the Azure Front Door. Like when the client sends a request to Azure Front Door, what's gonna happen and how Azure Front Door handles the client request. So in this video, we are going to dive deep into all of these layers and phases inside Azure Front Door to see and understand how Azure Front Door can process the incoming client requests. The first step we have here is when the client decided to send a request to Azure Front Door edge location. As we have said before, Azure Front Door is a global service, and also it can be used as a CDN, Content Delivery Network, and it has edge locations around the world. And based on the client location, the client request is going to be directed to the closest edge location to the customer or to the client location. And this is going to be the first step. Then after that, Azure Front Door is going to try to match the incoming HTTP request to a front door instance that you have configured to your environment. And Front Door will be able to do this by using the host header of the incoming request. And if you are using a custom domain name, as I said before, you have to register your custom domain name in the Azure Front Door as well as in your domain provider. Then after Azure Front Door finds the right Azure Front Door instance that the customer wants to hit, then what's going to happen is establishing the TLS connection through TLS handshake between the client and the server, using the TLS certificate that you have provided for your custom domain, or in case you're using the default endpoint of Front Door, then the Front Door certificate is going to be used in this case. Then moving to the next step, which is evaluating the WAF rules. This is definitely going to take place only if you have enabled the Web Application Firewall for your Azure Front Door. And if you didn't enable WAF inside your front door, then there is no WAF rules is going to be executed. And in this phase, if there is any violation has been detected, then Azure front door is going to stop the processing of the incoming request and is going to respond to the client with an error. However, if the incoming request was genuine, doesn't have any security issues, it's going to be processed or forwarded to the next step, where front door is going to match the routing rule to the incoming request. And we are going to dive deeper into this in a separate video. And as we said before, there are rules engine can get associated with the routing rules. And if you have already associated some rules engine with your routing rules, then they are going to be evaluated and see if they are meeting the conditions or not. Keeping in mind that the rules engine actions can override the routing rules you have already defined for your Azure front door. Then if you have configured caching for the Azure front door, then if the response has been already cached in one of the Azure front door edge locations, then in this case the response is going to be returned from the edge locations cache. Assuming that the cache was enabled, then the process is going to be terminated at that point, and the client is going to get a response from the front door edge location cache. However, if the cache was disabled, then the execution is going to move on to the next step, where Azure front door is going to select a backend target from the backend pool. As we said before, the backend pool is a logical grouping of many resources to be in the same pool. And front door is going to make this selection based on three factors: the health status of the backend instance, whether it is healthy or not. And front door is able to know this by using the health probes, as we said before. The second factor is the routing method for the backend pool, and also if you have enabled session affinity in Azure front door. These are the three main factors that Azure front door is using to determine what would be the backend instance that are going to be selected to send the incoming request to this backend target. Finally, front door is going to go ahead and send the incoming request to the selected backend target in order to be executed, and then returning the response to the client. So these are the different phases and processes and layers that are going through inside Azure front door in order to process the incoming request and return a response to the client. It's very important to know where these layers set within Azure front door and when they are getting executed, and what layers can override the actions of a previous layer, so you understand how it works internally. So when you configure Azure front door, you can configure it correctly. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the routing rule matching in Azure front door. In a production environment, you are not going to end up having 2 or 3 routing rules as we see in front of us here. You are going to end up having hundreds of routing rules in your production workloads. So it's very important to understand how the routing rule matching works. And you should be able to tell which routing rule is going to be triggered based on an incoming request that is hitting your Azure front door. And in this video, we are going to dive deep into the routing rule matching in Azure front door. So let's get started and dive into one of our routing rules we have configured before. So when it comes to the routing rule matching, I want you to imagine 2 sides, the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And what we are trying to do here is to do some matching between the left-hand side and the right-hand side. The left-hand side is going to be the incoming match, and it's going to be determined by 3 factors. The incoming protocol, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS or both protocols. Second factor is going to be the front end, whether it's a default endpoint of Azure front door or a custom domain name you have specified for your front door. This is the second factor. And the third factor is the path you have specified in the incoming requests. So these three factors together are considered to be the left-hand side of the picture and what we call it the incoming match. Then what sits on the right-hand side is the route. So based on these three factors I just talked about, we wanna route the traffic coming through the three factors into a specific route that sits on the right-hand side. And we are going to dive deeper into the matching process for the front-end domains and for the paths as well. So let's go to the Azure documentation and see some examples of the front-end matching. The matching rule is very easy and straightforward. The first thing Azure Front Door is trying to do is to find an exact match to the incoming request. If Azure Front Door didn't find any exact match, then it's gonna respond with 400 bad request error. So let's say that we have defined the three routing rules in Azure Front Door. Routing rule A, B, and C. And these are the different front-end hosts for the different routing rules. And these are the different paths as well. Now let's try to work out which routing rule is going to be matched based on the incoming front-end host. If the request was foo.contoso.com, we have it already defined in routing rule A and routing rule B. And in this case, rules A and B are going to be matched for this request. However, if we have a request for fabricam.com, again we have an exact match in rule C, then our matching rule it's gonna be routing rule C. And if we try to hit images.fabricam.com, which we don't have an exact match in our front-end hosts, then we are gonna get 400 response code bad request. And if we try to hit foo.adventurework.com, again we have an exact match in routing rule C, so we are going to respond with routing rule C. However, if we tried these three routing rules that we haven't defined before, like contoso.com, adventureworks.com, or northwindtraders.com, for all these three requests, we are going to get 400 response code bad requests because there is no exact match to any of these requests in the front-end hosts in our routing rules. Hopefully it now makes more sense. Now let's have a closer look at the path matching. So we have already talked about the front-end matching and understand how it works. Now we are going to talk about the path matching, and it's very similar to the front-end matching rules. So firstly, Azure Front Door will try to find an exact match to the path. If it didn't find an exact match to the incoming path, then Azure Front Door is going to try to find a routing rule with a wildcard path. If Azure Front Door didn't find it, then it's gonna respond with 400 response code or bad request. So let's try to work it out again, as we have done before. So let's say these are the different routing rules we have configured for our Azure Front Door. And this is the front-end host configuration. All of them are the same, and the path here is different. And what we are going to work out here on the right-hand side of the screen is to try to work out what would be the matched routing rule based on the incoming request. So, when we get a request for contoso.com, again, it's an exact match to our routing rule A. So in this case, it's gonna be routing rule A. And if our incoming request, contoso.com/A, so it's gonna be an exact match to routing rule B we have specified. And our matched rule here, it's gonna be B. And if we have got an incoming request for contoso.com/AB, again we have an exact match for routing rule C, and our matched rule, it's going to be rule C. And if we get an incoming request, contoso.com/ABC, Again, we have an exact match with rule D, and this is going to be our matched rule. However, if we have got an incoming request with something random, like \AB ZZZ, that we don't have any exact match in our path here. In this case, we are gonna go to the next step, which Azure Front Door will try to match it with a wildcard path. And in this case, we have it already defined in routing rule B. And B here is gonna be our matched rule. And if we get some incoming request, contoso.com/abc/, we have an exact match to this incoming request, which is routing rule E. So our matching rule, it's going to be E. And if we are get an incoming request, \abc/D, as you can see here, we don't have an exact match. So we are going to move to the next step, where we are going to look for wildcard path. And in this case, we have routing rule F meets our condition. And rule F, it's gonna be our matched rule. And if you have got an incoming request, ABC/DEF, we have an exact match in routing rule G. And G here, it's gonna be our matched route. And if we have got an incoming request, ABC/DEF/ZZZ, as you can see, we don't have an exact match. So we'll try to match it with a wildcard path. And we have already one here for routing rule F. And in here, I'm gonna put routing rule F, it's gonna be matched for this incoming request. And if we have got incoming request, ABC/DEF/GHI, again, we don't have any exact match. So we are gonna go for the closer wildcard. And as we can see here, routing rule F is gonna be matched to this incoming request. And if we try to put contoso.com/path, again, we don't have any exact match. Don't confuse it with routing rule H, it's a little bit different. So we don't have an exact match to \path. And in this case, we are gonna look for a wildcard and we are going to go for routing rule B. If we have got an incoming request, contoso.com/path/, we have an exact match, which is routing rule H. And in this case, it's gonna be our matched route. And finally, if we have an incoming request, \path/ZZZ, again, we don't have an exact match in our rules configuration, so we are going to go for the wildcard path and we are going to select routing rule B. These are just a few examples to show you what would be the routing rule that is going to be selected for the incoming requests based on the configurations we have configured in our Azure front door. However, we haven't seen a scenario here. Like, what if we had an incoming request that doesn't have an exact match and it doesn't match with the wildcard path? And in this case, we are gonna look at this example here. We have a route rule A with a host profile.contoso.com with this path. And if the incoming request is something completely different, that we don't have an exact match, and we don't have a wildcard that matches the incoming request, then in this case, Azure Front Door is going to respond with 400 response code bad request. As I said before, it's very important to understand how Azure Front Door makes the matching decision for the different routing rules. Because in production environments, you are going to end up having many routing rules, and you need to be able to tell which rule is gonna be triggered for different incoming requests. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the different routing methods that Azure Front Door is using to route incoming traffic requests to a selected backend instance. And Azure Front Door actually is using 4 routing methods in order to do this. First one, let's dive first into the backend pool. First routing method that Azure Front Door is using is latency-based routing. This is when Azure Front Door is going to send the client requests to the instance that has the lowest latency, and also within the acceptable latency sensitivity that we have configured in our backend pool. Generally speaking, the user requests are going to be sent to the closest instance to the user location. So when I say the closest instance, I don't mean geographical location. I mean from a networking latency perspective. Then the second routing method that Azure Front Door is using is the priority routing method. This is when you define some set of primary backend instances and some set of secondary backend instances, and then when the primary instances are not available for any reason, then the traffic is going to be directed to the secondary backend instance. We call this like active-active deployment or active-passive deployment to ensure high availability architecture for the backend services. And the third routing method we have in here is the weighted routing method. And you can configure it in a way to ensure that you distribute the traffic evenly across your backend instances. Only if the latency is within the acceptable latency sensitivity range that you have specified for your backend pool. Finally, and it's not in the backend pool, it's in the front-end configuration, this session affinity. This is when you want to enable session affinity in the front door. Then Azure Front Door is going to send subsequent user requests to the same server where the user had already initially sent their first request. It's a kind of maintaining the same session for the particular user. Now, out of all of these 4 different methods, how Azure Front Door is going to determine which instance or which routing method is going to take place. So let's look at this example here in Azure documentation. So these are the different phases or stages that Azure Front Door is going to go through in order to determine what is the selected instance that Azure Front Door is going to send the traffic to it. So in this scenario, we assume that we have 6 instances, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And in our first phase, Azure Front Door is trying to determine out of these 6 instances, which instances are the healthy ones. And we ended up having only 4 instances that are considered to be the healthy instances for Azure Front Door. So we are walking away from the first step with 4 healthy instances. Now we are coming to the second evaluation or second step, which is priority-based routing. Assuming that we have configured our backend pool in a way to make A, B, and D has priority 1, while instance F will have priority 2. So according to this configuration, we will walk away from the second phase, having only 3 instances valid, which are A, B, and D. Then move into the latency step. And let's assume that the latency for instance A is 15 milliseconds, the latency for instance B is 30 milliseconds, and the latency for instance D is 60 milliseconds. And we have configured our acceptable latency or latency sensitivity in our pool to be 30 milliseconds, for example. So according to this, we will walk away from the latency step having 2 healthy instances, A and B, because as we see in front of us here, D doesn't sit in the acceptable latency range that we have specified. So currently, we're coming to the last step with 2 healthy instances, A and B, that are healthy, up and running, has the same priority and within the same latency sensitivity range we have specified in our backend pool, then let's say that we have configured our weights to be 5 for instance A and 8 for instance B. Then the traffic is going to be distributed in a ratio of 5 to 8 among A and B. So for every 5 requests that are going to be routed to instance A, instance B are going to get 8 requests. So this is just to show you how Azure Front Door is using different routing methods to make a decision about what would be the selected instance to send the traffic to it. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into the priority traffic routing, and we have talked about it before in a previous video. So priority traffic routing allows you to configure high availability architecture for your services. So you can have an active deployment similar to what we have in front of us here when all backend instances has the same priority number. Or you can configure it to be in an active passive way. This is when you have some backend instances has a higher priority than the others. So maybe if I'm gonna go ahead and change the priority of the other backend instance in this configuration, I have configured my backend pool to work as an active passive model. So priority 1 is gonna receive the traffic all the time, and as long as it is up and running, priority 2 will never get any traffic from Azure Front Door. Priority 2 instances are only going to get traffic from Azure Front Door when priority 1 instances becomes unhealthy or unable to accept traffic from front door for any reason. And when we define the priority number, it has to be a number between 1 to 5, and the lower the number, the higher the priority you are going to specify for your backend instance. Now, coming to the weight traffic routing of our backend pool, as we said before, it's a way to tell or to distribute the traffic evenly across the backend instances. And we can configure it to be any number between 1 to 1000. And the default value is 50. So what's going to happen is the traffic is going to be routed to the backend instance based on the weights we have configured in our backend pool. And as long as the latency for the backend instances are within the latency sensitivity we have specified in our backend pool, as we have seen in this example. Latency routing method takes place before weighted routing method. This is to ensure that all backend instances that are going to get into the weighted traffic routing fits within the latency sensitivity for our backend pool that we have configured in our Azure Front Door. And there are many scenarios you want to implement the weighted traffic routing. When you want to have a gradual application upgrade, so you are going to create a new set of instances in the backend pool, and then gradually you want to increase the traffic to the new instances until you shift all the traffic to the new backend instances. Also when you want to migrate an application to Azure as well. And the final routing method, we are going to talk about sets in the front-end host, which is the session affinity. So by default, having session affinity disabled for Azure Front Door, Azure Front Door is going to send the requests coming from the same client to different backend servers. And in some situations, this might not be the best practice, because sometimes you want to implement some session management for your users using the backend servers. And if the initial user request has been sent to a particular backend instance, you want to maintain the subsequent user requests will be sent to the same backend instance. This is what the session affinity will allow us to do. Will allow Azure Front Door to have or maintain a session for all incoming requests coming from the same user, and then allow Azure Front Door to send all these requests to the same server. So in this video, we have talked about the different routing methods that Azure Front Door is using to route the incoming requests to a selected backend instance. And this table is really helpful to summarize what are the different steps and which one takes place first and how it contributes to the incoming inputs to the second phase. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the front door standard and premium tiers. Although it's still in public preview, but I rather to cover it in my video as well. So we are going to dive deep and show you how can you create a front door, whether it's a standard or premium tier, and what are the feature comparisons between standard and premium. And then at the end, we are going to cover the pricing between the front door classic, standard, and premium versions. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about Azure Front Door Standard and Premium tier. It's not very different from Front Door Classic that we have already seen throughout the video. But I wanted to give you a chance to see both tiers so you can see what are the improvements and what are the differences between the classic version of Azure Front Door and Standard and Premium tier. So if I'm gonna browse to the Premium tier or Front Door Standard Premium tier, you will be able to see the classic front door that I've already created before. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a front door standard premium, which is still in public preview. And at the beginning, I have two options, whether I wanna use an Azure front door or use other offerings, which is primarily around using a CDN for different providers. Now let's stick to Azure front door, and I'm gonna go with the custom create to give you more chance to have a look at the detailed steps of building up our Azure front door. Let's go ahead with that. Now I'm gonna put it in Australia East region, and I'm gonna go for the premium tier because some features are only available in the premium tier, and I want to give you a chance to have a look at it. Now let's go to the secrets. And here you are going to specify or add different certificates you want to add to your Azure front door. You remember when I mentioned that when you create a custom domain name for your Azure front door, you need to provide a certificate for the custom domain name. And in this screen, you will be able to add your own certificate. Get onto the endpoint screen. And let's go ahead and add an endpoint. I'm gonna call the endpoint name to be front door premium. Then let's put some numbers. And let's go ahead and add the endpoint. Now you are going to see the different steps I need to do to configure my endpoint properly. So I'm gonna start adding the origin group, which is exactly the same as the backend targets that we used to do for the front-end classic. So I'm gonna call this backend. And then in here, I'm gonna add an origin. So let's go ahead and call this origin 1. And for my origin type, I'm gonna go for app service and selecting app service 1. And this is one of the key features that's supported in the premium tier, enabling a private link service for your backend targets or for your origins. So what is the private link service? Let's say that you are having some VMs in a private VNet, or maybe you are using a PaaS environment like Azure App Service, like what we are using, or you want to access blob storage without having these services enable or accessible to the public internet. So having a private link service, it's gonna allow the front door to be able to access the PaaS environments or internal VNets securely without exposing those backend targets to the public internet. And when you are going to establish or enable the private link service on a particular origin, you are going to receive an email and you will have to approve it before the traffic will start to flow to your backend origin. At the moment, private link service is not available in some regions, including Australia. So I'm not going to enable the private link service for my app service. Let's go ahead and add it. And let's add another backend target or another origin. Let's call it origin 2. And I'm going to select the other web application I've created before. And let's leave everything to the default values. Nothing new in here. All of these things we have talked about it in the Azure Front Door Classic. So let's go ahead and add our origin group, which is our backend. Then after creating or adding a backend, we need to specify a routing rule. So I'm gonna call it routing rule. And then I'm gonna select the front-end domain and the origin group. It's going to be my backend. And I'm gonna add the routing rule. Also, I can specify the WAF policies and bot protection and DDoS attacks while I'm creating the front door premium tier. And as you can see, although I have a WAF policy already created before, it's not applicable to be associated to the Azure front door standard or premium tier. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new WAF policy. New WAF. I'm gonna call it front door premium. And I need to get rid of the underscore. And then add bot protection. And I'm gonna associate it to the front end point of my front door. These are the main things I need to specify before being able to create my Azure front door. But probably I have missed some information. So let's get back to the name. Okay, I'm gonna call it front door premium. And then let's put some random numbers. Now let's go ahead and create my Azure front door. So the deployment has failed for some reason. And as you can see here, because it failed to attach or create the security policies. So even though that specific step has failed, my Azure front door has been created and my WAF policy has been created. Probably I need to do this step manually at some point. Anyways, so I'm gonna go to my front door premium and see what are the main differences between the classic and premium versions. Probably it's around the interface. In the point manager here, it's gonna be the new interface to organize your front end, backends, routing rules, and also enabling your security and WAF policies on specific endpoints. And here are the domains that you are going to specify in your Azure front door, whether they are default endpoints or they are custom domain names that you are going to create. And the origin groups here are going to be the backend targets to route the traffic through Azure front door to land to the backend targets. And the new name that Azure front door premium tier is using is origin group instead of backend targets. And the rule set, similarly as the front door classic, you can create certain rules and conditions and use them to override certain actions that have been specified in the routing rules. Now the security, we have it in a separate menu item by itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach the WAF policy because it hasn't been attached for some reason. I'm gonna associate it to the front end of my front door. And then going to the optimization here, which is one of the new features in the front door premium. So in the optimization, it tells me what improvements I could do in my current front door configurations. And as you can see, I haven't enabled caching or compression on my routing rule in my Azure front door. And this could be one of the improvements that I could apply straight away. Now the WAF policy has been associated. So let's go back to security and see what are the differences between the front door classic and the premium. So here we can see the association with the WAF policy that we have created with our domain. And we can dive deeper into the WAF rule here and see what is the difference. And the main thing here in the managed rules, if we are going to have a look, you will notice that Azure Front Door Premium could be associated to a higher level of managed rule set offered by Microsoft It's still in preview, but we didn't had the same chance to associate rule set 2 to Azure Front Door Classic tier, if you remember. Also, you have a chance to associate it to a bot protection rule sets. And this is the same as we had it in Azure Front Door. And all of the actions you can do in the WAF policy we have talked about in the Front Door Classic. There is no much difference, although there is much more rules that are associated or created in set 2, in rule set 2. Now let's go back to the Azure Front Door. And in secrets here, you can manage your different certificates that are coming from Key Vault, as we have seen before. Now, one of the other key improvements or key features in Azure Front Door Premium tier is built-in real-time reports. It allows you to see the data in real time as they come through to your Azure Front Door. So you can see the different traffic coming to your Azure Front Door according to different domains. Also, you can see different usage metrics, data transferred in and out, protocols used, how many requests, the bandwidth and latency, all of this information, it's going to be available to you. One of the key metrics or key information that I like is the traffic by location. And it's been already used in APIM, which is key for me to tell me if I'm getting an attack from a particular location around the world. I find it really useful to have a view of where the traffic is coming from that is hitting my services. And this has been already available in APIM 2 years ago or something. And I'm really glad that Microsoft added it to the Azure Front Door since it's such a global service. Now, and you have some graphs telling you the cache hit ratio and the cache hit and cache miss percentage. So you know what you need to do differently for your cache. And then you're going to be able to see the top URL, top referrer, and top user agents. All of these are new kind of reports that will be available in the Azure Front Door Standard and Premium tiers. And then if you are using a Premium tier, you are going to have an access to additional set of reports. Comes under security here, which is primarily focused on the WAF, Web Application Firewall. And you will have more detailed information about how many allowed traffic, blocked, logged, or redirected. So in the classic version of Front Door, we didn't get to see that level of detail. Also, you will be able to see much detailed information about your security and WAF policies. So these are the main things I want you to be aware of when it comes to the Azure Front Door Standard Premium tiers. As I said before, they are still in public preview. And I'm not sure if Azure is going to get rid of the classic Front Door altogether and keep it strict to Standard or Premium tier, or probably they are gonna keep both working next to each other. I haven't found a clear communication about that, but either way, we know how both works and what are the differences and what are the new features that you could be using for Standard and Premium tiers. That's all I have for you in this video. Probably I need to go back and clean things up. So I'm gonna go back to my Azure Front Door, and before I delete it, I want to deassociate the firewall policy from my front door. So I'm gonna go to my WAF policy and deassociate it from my front door. Until this happens, I'm gonna go back to my front door and I'm gonna delete it. Now I'm gonna get back to my WAF policy and I'm gonna delete it as well. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video we are going to look at a feature comparison between Front Door, Standard and Premium tiers. And as I mentioned before, it's around the private origin. As you can see here, it's not supported in the Standard tier and it's only offered in the Premium tier. And for the WAF policy, you can only apply custom rules for the Standard tier. and you're not going to have the default rule set for the WAF policies, unless you're going to go for the premium tier. Also, the bot protection, it's not offered in the standard tier. And finally, the security report, it's not going to be provided for the standard tier. So this is a feature comparison between the key features between the Azure Front Door Standard and Premium, so you can know upfront which tier you should go for based on your requirement and based on what you're trying to achieve. However, I didn't find any comparison between Azure Front Door Classic and Standard or Premium. So if I want to try to put Front Door Classic features, I couldn't put it under either of Standard or Premium because it's kind of mixing of both. But it's very useful to keep in mind what are the key differences between the different tiers. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the pricing for Azure Front Door Classic, Standard, and Premium tiers. Let's start with the Classic tier pricing. So for the Classic tier pricing, it's around 4 main dimensions. Data transfer out from the edge locations to the clients. Data transfer in from the client to the edge locations. And then the number of routing rules you have configured for your Azure Front Door. And then the bandwidth, which is how much data transferred between Front Door and Azure websites. And you will be able to see the breakdown of each of these dimensions in the tables below. However, if you decided to go with Azure Web Application Firewall, it's going to have an additional cost that you need to be aware of as well. But when it comes to Azure Front Door Standard or pricing tier, the dimensions are a little bit different. So you are going to get charged based on 5 dimensions for Standard or Premium tier. The first one, you are going to pay base fee based on the tier you are using. Then you are going to pay for outbound data transfer from the edge location to your clients, and also an outbound data transfer from the edge locations to the origins, which are the backend targets. Also, you are going to pay for the number of requests coming from your clients to the Azure Front Door edge locations. However, you are going to have a free data transfer from the origins, which is your backend target, that are hosted in Azure data centers, and to your Azure Front Door edge locations. And when it comes to the base fee that you will have to pay, this is going to be the monthly price you are expected to pay for Standard tier and Premium tier. And as you can see, the Premium tier is much more expensive than the Standard tier. And then you're going to see the breakdown of different cost estimates for different dimensions for the Standard or Premium tier. It's very important to keep an eye on the pricing for the services you are going to use for Azure, and especially when you are going to have a variable cost. That's depending on how much data transfer in and out are going through your service, because it's going to change the monthly bill for your usage a lot. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to dive deep into the Web Application Firewall, or some people prefer to call it WAF. And we are going to understand how the WAF works and when it takes place in terms of the incoming requests to your Azure Front Door. Then we are going to dive more into configuring the WAF policy and what is the difference between managed rules and custom rules and how you can specify both for your environment. Then we are going to touch on the different WAF modes, whether it's detection or prevention, and also the different policy settings you can specify for your WAF policy. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about how the Web Application Firewall works. In the previous video, we have created a WAF policy and we associated it with our Azure Front Door. And by having WAF in our architecture, it's going to defend our web application and our web services against common attacks. But someone might be asking where the WAF lives, where the WAF is deployed. We already know that Azure Front Door is a global service, and we are going to end up having Azure Front Door instances in all edge locations for Microsoft Azure networks. Where exactly the WAF is going to be deployed? Exactly at the edge location. So we are trying to add additional layer of security, which is our WAF here. And we are placing it closer to the attack source, closer to the attacker, to prevent the incoming attacks before it reaches to your network or to your systems, which is going to ensure you have a secure solution, scalable at scale, and also it's not going to compromise performance because it happens at the edge location. And this actually reminds me with one of the cloud design patterns. We have talked about it before, like the gatekeeper pattern, which is simply adding additional layer of security to protect your systems against potential attacks. And probably I'm gonna put a link for the gatekeeper video for you to review if you are interested. Now let's get back to the WAF policy. As you can see here, it has set of rules, managed rules and custom rules. Managed rules, as the name suggests, it's managed completely by Microsoft Azure. And for the custom rules, you can go ahead and create custom rules by yourself. And in case if you had both rules in place, like you had already managed rules and you have created some custom rules. In this case, the custom rules are going to be processed and evaluated before the managed rules. Because usually when you create a custom rule, it means you want to create some sort of exception for something that's been already implemented in the managed rule. And we are going to talk about these managed rules and custom rules in more details in a separate video. Now, switching the firewall mode from detection to prevention, it used to be in the policy settings, but somehow Azure moved it to the overview here. So from here, you should be able to switch your firewall mode from prevention to detection, or the other way around. So what's the difference? When you set your firewall mode to be a detection, your firewall will not block any traffic, but it's going to log it to the log Analytics Workspace that we have specified before. It's going to be a really good practice to set your firewall in a detection mode in a development environment, so you'll be able to see how the firewall deals with different requests coming through your firewall. However, for a production or testing environment, it's really recommended to set your firewall up in prevention mode. Now let's go and have a quick look at the managed rules. And as you can see here, we can select the default rule set for our firewall. And in this case, we have selected rule set 1.0, and also you can add additional rule sets. I'm gonna go ahead and add bot rule set, which is going to add a managed bot protection rule set to protect my firewall from potential bot attacks. Alright, now my bot rule sets has been added. So let's scroll all the way down and have a quick look. So we have three categories of bots: bad bots, good bots, or unknown bots. The bad bots are the bots coming from a malicious IP addresses, and they are identified from Microsoft Threat Intelligence feed, and it gets updated every hour. You don't really need to worry about it because Microsoft manages it for us. Also, we have a good bots like verified search engines or search crawlers. And we have set of unknown bots as well. This is all I have for you in this video. It was a quick walkthrough inside our web application firewall, and in the next few videos, we are going to dive deep into the managed rules and the custom rules and how they work together. Also, we are going to have a look at the log Analytics Workspace logs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are gonna go ahead and create a web application firewall policy and associate it to our Azure front door. Also, we are gonna enable the log and monitoring on our Azure front door, so we'll be able to see the different firewall logs in the log analytics. So let's get started by creating a web application firewall policy. And we have done it before. Let's go ahead and create one. Let's select policy for my front door, and I'm gonna put it in Australia East resource group, and I'm gonna call it WAF for front door. Australia East region, and I'm going to leave it as a detection mode. Probably I'm gonna leave everything to the default values as of now. The only thing I'm gonna do in the association, I'm gonna associate it to my front door. Now let's go ahead and create my WAF policy. And while it's been created, I'm gonna go back to my Azure front door and enable the diagnostic settings, or create a new diagnostic settings. So you would be able to see the different logs that are coming through my Azure front door. So let's add the diagnostic settings. I'm gonna select all logs. If you can notice here, there are two types of logs: front door access logs or web application firewall access logs. And as you can imagine, the web application firewall logs are related to the WAF policy that we have just associated to our Azure front door. And I'm going to select all metrics as well, and I'm going to send all of the data to a log analytics workspace. But I don't have any, so I'm gonna go ahead and create a log analytics workspace. So I'm gonna put it in Australia East resource group. I'm gonna call it log analytics front door, and I'm gonna host it in Australia East region. I'm gonna go ahead and create my log analytics workspace. Alright, now my log analytics workspace has been created. I'm gonna go back to my Azure front door, and probably I need to refresh this page. Adding a new diagnostic settings, selecting all logs and metrics, and sending all of them to my log analytics workspace that I just created. I'm gonna call my diagnostic settings name to be my settings. And then I'm gonna go ahead and save my changes. Alright, so my changes has been saved. Looking at the WAF policy has been already deployed, and the log analytics workspace as well. That's all I have for you in this video. It was a quick one to show you how can we set up the web application firewall for the Azure front door, and also how we set up the monitoring and logs for the web application firewall. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video we are going to dive deep into the managed rules of our web application firewall. As we said before, the web application firewall has a set of managed rule sets that are managed already for you by Azure. And they are compliant with the OWASP best practices. So these rule sets covering the protocol attacks, local file inclusions, remote file inclusions, remote command executions, PHP injection attacks, cross-site scripting, SQL injection attacks, which is very common, and session fixation and Java attacks, in addition to the other bot attacks that we have added in the previous videos. I'm not gonna jump into the details of each of these rules. It's not gonna be the purpose of this course. And I don't wanna go sideways from our focus, which is front door and the web application firewall. So what we can do with these different rule sets, you can select a specific rule set, and if it doesn't work for your situation, then you can go ahead and disable it, which means that the firewall is not going to apply this rule for the incoming traffic. And if you are going to do this, if you are going to disable a certain rule from being executed at your firewall, you need to have a very good reason for doing this. Like, you should be able to explain why you had to disable this specific rule and how this affects the incoming traffic to getting through the firewall. Anyways, as you can see here, the action for this rule is block. However, you are able to change the action for this rule. Maybe you want to allow a specific rule to get through the firewall instead of just disabling it. Or maybe you just want to log that event, or maybe redirect it to another URL. But keep in mind, if you are going to allow a specific rule set to be able to get through your firewall, this is going to be applied to all incoming requests that the firewall identifies under this rule set. So you need to be very careful about that. However, as I said before, if you are going to disable or change the action of a specific rule, you need to be very clear why are you doing this. Now I'm going to show you a different way to manage the exceptions through your default rule set. Like what if you want to keep this rule enabled and you don't want to change its action. So you want to keep this rule at your firewall to block any potential attacks. At the same time, you want to allow some exceptions to allow the genuine traffic coming from a genuine sources to get through the firewall. How you are able to do this? You should be able to do this by using the managed exclusions. So let's go ahead and see how can we do this. By managing exclusions, you can go ahead and add a new exception. And in here, you get to specify the rule set and the rule group. And in this case, I'm going to specify the SQL injection. And in here, for the rule, let's go ahead with the injection attack. And then in here, I'm going to specify the match criteria. Maybe request header name, it's going to start with SQL equal or SQL. And let's go ahead and save it. All right, now we have created an exception for our managed rule. And what this is going to do is going to tell my firewall to allow incoming requests that has this criteria that we have created to get through the firewall. Even though the firewall could identify it as a potential attack, but because we have created an exception in here and the incoming request matches the exception, the firewall is going to allow the request to get through. We have done this by keeping our role enabled. So our role is going to be effective to block other potential attacks. And while we are here, let's see the different rule sets you can assign to your firewall. Like you can choose from different rule sets, or you can go for none. And I couldn't think for any reason why do you want to go with no rule set. Anyways, also for the additional rule set, you can specify an additional rule set for bot protections. This is all I have for you in the managed rule sets for the web application firewall. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the custom rules we can define in our web application firewall. So let's go ahead and create a new custom rule. And I'm gonna call it location rule. It's gonna be enabled matching a condition. And the priority here is key because the custom rules are going to be executed in order, and the lower the number, the higher the priority. And the custom rules are going to take place before the default rules or managed rules, if you remember. So I'm going to specify my role based on a geolocation. If the traffic is coming from Australia, then my WAF is going to block it. Also, I'm able to add another rule. Location 2, for example, I'm gonna specify priority 2. Let's try to specify the same priority to see if it's possible. Now, as you can see, it's not possible. Each custom role priority has to be unique in your firewall. So I'm gonna go with priority 2. But this time, I'm going to specify a CIDR range. Maybe you started to receive a malicious attack from a specific IP address, and you want to block receiving any more requests from the IPs coming from this range. So you can do this by specifying the CIDR range to block these attacks at the firewall. And let's go ahead and add that. Also, we can add another rule based on the size of the query string parameter, or maybe on a request URI or other request header or any of these attributes. If the size is greater than 100 characters, then we are gonna deny the traffic and block it at the firewall. And for this role, I'm gonna call it size role. And let's go ahead and add it. Also, I need to specify priority, so I'm gonna go for 3. Now let's add one more role for the string. It could be applied to any of these parameters again. Maybe when the request header equals customer and it contains XYZ, then I'm gonna block it. I'm gonna specify priority 4 for the header role. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add it. So I'm gonna add one more role for the rate limit role. And for this role, I'm gonna go by specifying a rate limit instead of match. And let's go with priority 5. So the limit duration is gonna be over 1 minute. And the threshold, I'm gonna specify it 1000. And if I started to get more than 1000 requests over 1 minute, and these requests are coming from Austria, for example, then I'm gonna deny and block this traffic. Also, you can go ahead and enable or disable a specific role for your web application firewall. I think that's all I have for you for the custom roles. Also, it's very important to remember that the custom roles take place before the managed rules for your web application firewall. And for the custom roles, they are going to be processed according to the priority you have specified for your custom rules. The lower the number, the higher the priority. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the web application firewall settings. And we have talked about it briefly in the previous videos. So for your WAF, you can go ahead and disable it and enable it back again. Also, there are 2 WAF modes, detection mode, and you will be able to switch it to prevention mode from here. And also I said the difference between detection mode and prevention mode. Detection mode, it will not block any traffic. However, it's gonna log it in the log analytics workspace. But the prevention mode, it's going to block that traffic if there is any potential attack in the incoming requests. Now let's go to the policy settings and have a look. As you can see here, you will be able to redirect all blocked traffic to a specific URL. Also, you can respond with a specific response code. So let's go ahead and see what are the options. So these are the available response codes that you can use in your web application firewall response when your WAF blocks a specific request. Also, you can specify a custom message as well to be sent in the response body. Now, let's go ahead and bring this back to 403, which was the default. While we are here, let's go to the associations. And if you remember, you can associate a single WAF policy to multiple Azure front doors. However, for the Azure front door, it can be only associated to one WAF policy at a time. And if you remember, I have mentioned that when you set your firewall in a detection mode, then the firewall is not going to block any traffic. However, it's gonna log it in the log analytics workspace. So now I'm gonna show you how can you see it. So let's go back to my Azure front door and browse to the logs. And in here, you will be able to see the firewall audit queries that you can go ahead and run them. So let's go ahead and run this query. And of course, it won't return us any data back because I didn't have any blocked traffic. As you can see here, if I run this query over the last 7 days, I wouldn't get any data back. But the main thing I want you to notice here that we have configured our query to look for the logs that are coming for category front door web application firewall log. This is where my web application firewall it's going to place all the logs related to the firewall for my Azure front door. This is all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to dive deep into the monitoring part of our Azure front door. And we are going to see in details the different metrics you can use for your Azure front door in addition to the web application firewall. Also, I'm going to show you how can you set up some alerts that are going to notify you if the usage exceeds a specific threshold that you can specify. Then we are going to have a look at the predefined queries that you can check in the Log Analytics Workspace to see the behavior of your front door and your web application firewall. And finally, we are going to cover the health probes and how Azure front door is using it to ensure or check the health status of the backend targets. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video we are going to talk about front door metrics. And there are many metrics. You can get a lot of information about the Azure front door and the health status of your backend targets. So the first metric we have here is the backend health percentage. And this shows you the health percentage of your backend targets. And if I'm gonna expand the time range to be over the last 30 days, we are gonna see the health percentage of my backend targets. You can see that they are not 100% all the time because I am stopping my web apps or app services when I am not using them. Now, the other metric we have here is the backend request count. And as you can see, we got 400 requests to the backends over the last 30 days. However, if I'm gonna look at another metric, which is the request count, we will see that's 800, which is interesting. So my Azure front door received 800 requests over the last 30 days. But the backend request count was only 400. And this happened when the app services has been stopped or the configurations wasn't routing the requests properly to the backend targets. Also, other metric I want you to be aware of is the backend request latency. So this is how much time took from the backend to get a response through to the front door and then to the client. And as we can see here, if I made it to the maximum, you will be able to see it took around 4 seconds to get a response. This is the maximum, all right? And if I'm gonna put it next to another metric, which is the total latency. So this is going to help me to understand where the latency is coming from, whether the latency is coming from the backend targets or the latency is coming from the front door and the web application firewall. And as you can see in this graph here, the latency is coming from the backend targets. Now, the other metric I want you to look at is the billable response size. This shows you how much you are going to pay for your responses. And if you look at the description here, it will make more sense. Also, it's good if you look at the request size, response size metrics to understand how much data your front door is receiving or responding to your clients. And finally here, you will be able to see the WAF request count over a certain period. However, I'm not getting any because I didn't send any more requests after I have configured my WAF on my Azure front door. These are the key metrics, or probably all metrics you could play around for your Azure front door. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the alerts you can set up on your Azure front door. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new alert rule. And you can signal or specify the alert rule on either a metric or log activity or activity log. So I'm going to go ahead with the metrics. I'm going to select the backend health percentage. And I'm going to select all the backend pool, current and futures. And if it dropped below 90%, then it's going to trigger my alert and send the notifications to the action group. As you can see here, I can specify the action group or create an action group that are going to react or receive a notification when this alert is triggered. And you can apply the same concept in creating other rules or other alert rules that are going to notify you about the health status of your Azure front door and the number of requests you're receiving, or maybe the number of requests that your WAF has blocked, because it will be a very good indicator to tell you that you might be under attack. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the log analytics in Azure front door. And we have configured it already in the diagnostic settings, if you remember, when we asked Azure front door to send all logs, including front door access logs, in addition to the web application firewall logs, plus all metrics, to the log analytics workspace that we have created before. So let's go back and see what are different sort of queries we can use and get some information about Azure front door. On the left hand side here, you can see the different categories of the queries. And in here, you are able to see different predefined queries that you can use for different categories. And I'm interested to show you the firewall queries, which is gonna show you how many requests had been blocked by the firewall. And because I didn't have any, I didn't get any data back. But the most important thing I want you to notice here, that we are filtering our query and make the category field equals front door web application firewall log. By doing this filter, we will be able to see all logs that our web application firewall has been blocked or allowed or does whatever action it does to these kind of requests. And this is not the only category, because we said we are already using Azure front door. So you are also able to use another category, which is front door access log, to get access to more sort of information about the incoming requests through your Azure front door. That's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the health proofs of Azure front door. As we said before, the health proofs is a way that Azure front door is using to know the health status of the backends. As you can see here, it's already configured for us and it's enabled by default. And we can configure here what HTTP verb that Azure front door is going to use when checking for the health status of the backend targets. Head HTTP verb is going to be more efficient than get HTTP verb. And then you're gonna specify the interval, like how often you want to configure your Azure front door to ping your backend targets to check for their health status. And Azure front door is going to use this configuration to check for the health status for your backend targets, and is going to use this information to decide what is the healthy instances that the Azure front door should direct the traffic to the healthy backend instances. This is all I have for you for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to clean up all resources we have used in this course. So let's go to the resource groups, and let's dig into the Australia East resource group. And you will be able to see here the different app services we have created, and our Azure front door, and the WAF policy, and the log analytics workspace. So let's go ahead and delete the resource group, which is going to delete all of the resources inside this resource group. That's all I have for you in this video. By the end of the course, I hope that you have enjoyed it. If you have any question, please feel free to put it in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.